It is Thursday, y'all. We have another episode of Late Night Vision Show. This is episode 203. So we've made it past the 200 milestone, and we're just moving on like it ain't no thing. But as usual, hey, we got Mr. Jason Robertson, owner of Outdoor Legacy. What's going on, Jason? Another Thursday. We are back again.
We are glad to be here, and I tell you what, we have been rolling on. I know it was just a few weeks ago that we were at 200, but man alive, time flies. Time flies when you're having fun, and so just every week I'm just shocked. Like, is it time to record another show? And you know, when you think about it, we get these things, we release them on Thursday, but we're obviously planning ahead for these things, and so Thursday it's a sigh of relief. They go out, and then immediately we're like, okay, what are we doing next week?
Yeah,
it's a constant cycle. So yeah, we are back again. Got a good show. This is going to be a fun show. I like this one. This is a good topic.
And we're not doing a review this week, which we have a lot of reviews still to do, and a lot of people have a lot of questions about some of the optics that they may have seen us using on social media, testing. We're right in the middle of testing a lot of different things. But Jason, you and I have both we've been testing multiple optics at one time, but the new Pulsar clip-ons, the Krypton and the Proton, we've got that. We've got the iRay micros that we've got to talk about, that you and I that we've seen quite a while ago and have been excited about, and knew that they were going to be a big splash onto the scene. And they've really, this past week, since they've been announced, have been really talked about heavily.
Been released, you mean? Yeah, I mean, they're here. Released. So been released, yeah.
They've been a lot of people on social media, showing pictures and videos of them. Really, really good stuff. We've got the fusions, the AGM fusions, which are the AGM binoculars with the laser rangefinders. What else? We got a bunch of.
We've
stuff.
Got the brand new Pulsar Thermion 2 XP50 LRF. We got first shipment of those, a very small shipment, but first shipment of those hit the U.S. Last week. And so those are just starting to trickle in. We're now testing that unit, and we'll be reviewing it ASAP as well. What else we got? We've got the new bearing optics. This is a bunch of the stuff that came out in the last few weeks. We've got the Vibe. It's a Hogster Vibe 25, the Hogster Vibe 35. Those are basically their Hogster units that now have video recording and Wi-Fi and smartphone app. Also, the very popular Super Hogster A3 from Bearing. That's going to be their newest version of the Super Hogster. Replace the original version, and so we do. I mean, is there anything else here? I mean, that's a big.
We got a pile of stuff.
List. We got a pile of stuff.
We had to break it up because it's a little monotonous when you're doing reviews every week, because it's just such a process. You've got all your information you're delivering. There's not a lot of entertainment when it comes to doing a review and good stuff and talking about fun stuff, which we like to do a lot. We don't like to do. We probably, I don't know, if it was up to our listeners, they would probably be okay with doing a review every week. But you and I are like, we got to break it up. Let's do something else. We got to get out of the process. But we are still, like I said, and we're probably leaving something out.
I'm sure we are.
I've got a pile.
Whoever
this
is, we've left something out. We're sorry. It's just the list is growing by the day. And hey, let me say this: Pulsar's also got some new optics that are coming very soon. Some stuff we've already talked about from SHOT Show that should be here anytime. The Talions, the new Axions, those should be here within, I don't know what, 2, 3, 4 weeks. I mean, probably 1st of April. Hey, Hans, I hate to even bring this up on the show, but Pulsar at their European sporting goods show, which is like SHOT Show here in the U.S., but in Europe, about, 2 weeks ago or so, announced 9 new thermal optics that are coming later this year, summer and fall. So much. And just it's going to be a review year. If you like thermal optics and you like reviews, then get ready, because we're going to have a bunch of them this year.
Well, and I know our reviews that come out on the internet and YouTube and all the socials. I know our reviews aren't the first ones that come out, but hopefully they're the ones that you're waiting on to see and get our final word. I mean, I would love to think that everybody's waiting on our reviews, but the thing is,
Probably not.
we don't. Yeah, we don't have the very first information out there, but we do a lot of testing. I mean, we really do. We
have the units. We just like to test them
we do, yeah.
A plenty of hands-on between both Hans and I before we really get out there. And the other thing that sometimes makes us be a little behind is we might only have one of those units to actually use, so we got to split them up. I'll use it for 2 weeks, send it to Hans, he use it for 2 weeks, and then we'll pass it back around a little bit. So it can definitely make the process a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's kind of what's happened with the Thermion XP50 LRFs, the Thermion 2s, is because
I don't want to let go of it and send it to Hans.
Well, we got such a small number of, everybody did. I mean, just such a small, we got so many people waiting on them. We couldn't take out 2. We can only take out 1 unit like we normally do 2. But anyway, with all that being said, y'all are just going to bear with us. We've got a lot of reviews to get through. I know that most of y'all come to us for the latest and greatest and all the information on the new stuff, and we are dedicated to continue to provide that. But today we want to do something fun. We've been thinking a lot about and talking a lot about the evolution of thermal optics and where we started. We kind of joke around about some of the old optics that we used to use and run around with. And at the time we thought it was just the coolest thing. I remember the optic that got me really hooked into it, into night hunting. Now it's not anything that you would even
throw rocks
it's something that you wouldn't even compare to anything that we've got today. But at the time it was revolutionary. I mean, you just never seen anything like it. The fact that you could look at night and see, items and animals light up like it was daytime. But we are going to take a look at what thermal optics might look like, because it's kind of a fun prediction, but we don't have any insider scientific information that we're providing, but what thermal optics might look like 5 years from now. So in 2027, Jason, I mean, here's the thing. Let's back up a little bit. If you were a child of the 80s, like I was, 80s and 90s,
yes.
but growing up in
born
the 80s.
In the 70s, but yes.
Born 70s, yeah. So if by this time we already thought that we would have floating cars, we thought
the
that
Jetsons,
we would have hoverboards, and not like the hoverboards that they have now. I mean, that's not
real
the
hoverboards.
Back to the Future hoverboard, where you're floating on air, basically. We thought that we would have that by then. Now we want to be a little bit more realistic than that when it comes to our thermal predictions. But think back to just 5 years ago. So to know where we're going to be 5 years from now, let's think about where we were 5 years ago from today. So 2016, 2017, what the thermal optics industry looked like then versus what it looks like now. And then let's talk about what it might look 5 years from now. 5 years from, and that would be what year is that? It's 2022, 2027. So what thermal optics are going to look like. It just sounds weird to even say 2027, but it feels weird to say 2022. But so let's talk a little bit about where we've come from, Jason, in just the 5 or 6 years that they've really gotten on the scene where nobody even knew what a thermal optic was, really.
Sure. So I like history. I like going back. I like looking at how things have changed. And, you made this comment about this evolution of things. And, if we look back at just cell phones and computers, look at that. I mean, when you got the first, bag phone, you just thought it was amazing that you could be in your vehicle and talk with no wires, to whoever. And then, then we moved from there and we got the bar type phones, and those became really popular, more popular than bag phones, a little more affordable, still expensive. And just that evolution of now our phones, we probably talk on them a very minute amount of the time compared to what we're using them for, whether it's texting, which again was something that didn't really exist way back then, emailing, and obviously surfing the internet, which for most of us in any practical sense didn't exist. I mean, it existed, but not any way we normally used it. And so I'm just making the point of, think about a phone. We call these phones, but we're really not talking on them that much compared to the amount of time total we're using them. We're doing all kinds of other things on them. So,
yeah, I remember when, cell phones, they've been out for a while, but when texting started getting popular, I would be like, text messaging is so stupid. Why would anybody do that? It's the dumbest thing ever. Why would you send a text message when you can call somebody?
That's because you had to press every key 3 times to get the letter you wanted.
You had all the numbers were also letters. So if you wanted like the letter C, you had to hit the number 1 3 times. It
was ridiculous.
It was. But yeah, and also talking about size of the phones versus, and comparing it to scopes, and, the phones were big, then they got really, really small, and now they're getting big again. It's almost like a reverse culmination of where we've come and where it's going to. But yeah, so one of the very first scopes I want to mention, one of the very first scopes that I really started using a lot was the Armasight Predator 336. And I've told this on the show before. And, it was the basic of the basic scope that you could possibly get. And, at the time, though, it was affordable and it was good enough you could go out and shoot a pig under 100 yards. But I do also remember, and we'll get into some of the details with some of the other scopes, that Predator was a pretty small scope, but I remember I had friends and family members that, they had the Armasight Zeus, which was like 100 millimeter thermal scope that looked like a satellite dish on top of a rifle. But they had great, beautiful image. It's just amazing what we're
beautiful
getting out
image for that time period.
For that, I mean, for that time period, it was huge. I mean, you couldn't, you had to have your own mount for, tripod for your rifle just to be able to hold this thing
huge.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of this. So, you mentioned the Predators and some of this Armasight stuff. So let's do a rollback. All right. So Hans said 5 years. Some of this is going to be 5 or 6 years. And I'm going to actually take us a little bit further back than that in a couple of these scenarios, just to kind of bring you in on where we're at. And so, I'm gonna do this, then I'll make some comments afterwards. So I just made a few notes, some things I scratched down, some stuff I dug around on my computer and pulled up. In 2016, Armasight, their base model Predator. Now I want to remember something. These were not 384 resolution units. These were 336 FLIR thermal sensors. 336, okay? Yep. They weren't 17 micron. I don't know what the FLIR was at the time, probably 25 micron or higher. But that Predator that Hans is talking about, their base model was $2,800. So you're looking at $3,000 for a thermal scope that honestly, it was hard to tell a hog from a coyote at 125, 150 yards. Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it was a 100-yard shooter. That's what it was. And you're basically going to spend $3,000 on that. They had a, I'm looking at some of the old pricing here. So FLIR had a Predator 640 that was the least expensive 640. I think at the time on the market, it was $4,000. It was not great. And another thing, don't forget this. This was back in the day when everything was 30 hertz. If you wanted 60 hertz, companies like Armasight offered it, and it was normally $1,000 upgrade to go from 30 to 60 hertz refresh rate so that the image wasn't laggy when you were like moving it around. And so the Pulsar Zeuses that Hans is talking about, they were 336 resolution. They were $3,800 to $5,200, and the 640 units were $5,000 to $7,000. And again, nothing against Armasight. Okay, it's nothing against these optics. At the time, they were fabulous. I mean, they were amazing. But now you throw rocks at them. You would take that $7,000 scope and be like, oh my goodness, like Hans said, this thing is huge. It's heavy. It eats batteries. There was no option for USB external battery packs back then. You had to buy proprietary batteries. They were expensive. They didn't last long. I mean, you were just buying a scope. You just were investing in CR123As. That's the way I was going to go.
Yeah.
Talking about some other companies. Now, this one, and by the way, not one of these scopes had video recording, anything like that. That did not exist. If you wanted video recording, you had to buy an MDVR. And, Ultimate Night Vision had the lock hold on the industry with the UNV MDVR. It's a little mini digital video recorder. We still have a few of them in the warehouse sitting there, about the size of a deck of playing cards. You stuck an SD card in it, and you had to have a custom built cable that went from that recording unit to your scope. And it depended on the scope, whether it was, an Armacide or a FLIR or an ATN or whatever. You had to have a custom built handmade cable, and those cables cost anywhere from $50 to $150 depending on what brand you had and how weird the connector was.
Yeah.
And then when you got your video off, by the way, you had to plug this thing into your scope, then you had to run the wires, put this thing in a buttstock pouch, turn it on. It was a mess. And then when you got done, your video looked terrible. And it was just the fact of it's just the video quality that was coming out of these scopes wasn't good back then, and then it was going to an external device and all that. So just remember that. We're only talking a few years ago. So let's roll back here. I want to talk about Pulsar for a minute. This will surprise some people because Pulsar, huge name, probably the leader in, worldwide thermal optics, selling all over the world. Let me tell you something about Pulsar. I went back and did some research. In 2014, Pulsar did not have a thermal scope. That's not that long ago. That's 8 years ago.
Right.
They did not have a thermal scope. I think they had a couple monoculars back then, way back. I'd have to go look to see if those were even thermal, but I think they did. 2015, they released the Apex XD units. Now, these XD units were, there was only 3 models. There was an XD38, XD50, and XD75. And there was actually, I think, the 50 and the 75. They had 2 models of each, and it was a very expensive, like $1,000 upgrade or something to get a different display screen in it. Yeah. Those units ranged from their 384 25 microns for $3,000, and they went up to $6,000 for the XD75. Again, 384. 25 micron. These were not 640 units. They didn't have a 640 unit. Okay. Now, I'm going to take this, and this is going to surprise some people that are familiar. It may not surprise them. Some people it will. 2017. That's 6 years ago, right? 2017.
5. Right?
5?
Yeah.
5 years. 5 years ago. All right. Drum roll. Pulsar released their first 640 thermal unit ever. That was their first 640. Now, this was a huge year. Oh, yeah. This right here, and we've in just a few random shows kind of talked about this. This is what, in my opinion, not only put Pulsar on the map, this is what made the thermal industry what it is today, with the 2017 release by Pulsar. This is when they released the Pulsar Core RXQ30V, $1,899 for a very basic entry-level thermal optic that was better than a lot of what we had seen at $3,000 and $4,000. That was the least expensive thermal optic of this kind of quality that we had ever seen. That was a game changer. That's when they introduced the Pulsar Trails. And so we're talking about the, the same trail that you're familiar with today. They didn't have laser rangefinders back then, but they looked at the same body, same housing. They had the internal video recording. They were supposed to have audio, but they couldn't get it working and couldn't get it synced up. They actually did not. It was in the scopes, but they had to disable it. That did not get enabled until 2018. All right. So 2018, we're talking about the first mainstream popular thermal optic with audio. 2018, that's not that long ago. All right.
Yeah,
2017 was the first video. And they also released the original models of the Pulsar Helions, their handheld thermals. So you got to think back to this. I mean, this was revolutionary. We're talking about thermal handhelds for $3,000 to $4,000, thermal rifle scopes that were better than we had ever seen from anybody before, with 6 to 8 hour removable rechargeable battery life, video recording, a Wi-Fi smartphone streaming app, picture in picture. Nobody had that. All these things. And we were basically looking at thermal scopes starting at basically $3,300. They had it. They had the Trail XQ30. That thing didn't stay around too long, but that was like $2,800. So $2,800 up to $5,000 for the XP50. The Apex XQs were also released that year. They were huge sellers, $2,500 and $2,800 with no video recording, nothing like that. Guys, I'm making this.
That year, 2017, that's what brought thermal optics to the mainstream. I mean, and it really, social media was a big part of that. But when scopes were able to start, where you could easily record video and transfer those to social media, that's what kind of lit the fuse of being able to see the hunts, people sharing the hunts. Still $3,000, $4,000, a lot of money, but a lot better than it was, and the optics were better. But yeah, that was really what kind of lit this whole thing off.
So that's where I want to just harp for just a minute. And I was leading into this obviously a while ago, but I'm going to make this really big statement, and this is not an insult to any of the other manufacturers out there. But had Pulsar not done what they did in 2017, because nobody caught up with them for a while, okay, we would not be where we are today. You would not, I'm going to make this big statement. You would not be listening to this show. This show would not exist. This would not be the thermal industry as we know it would not be where it was today if Pulsar hadn't released what they released in 2017. Granted, somebody was eventually going to do it. Maybe Pulsar would have done it in 2018. Maybe somebody else would have done it. It would have at least been 2 or 3 years down the road. And there's always a company that's got to do it. And don't get me wrong, other companies come along, they build off of that. They help build the market too. It's not an insult to these other companies to say they've never done anything unique or that they didn't help with this. But I'm saying Pulsar put thermals in with all the features at a much more affordable price in front of the masses. And it just blew up. And some of these newer companies that have come on the scene in the last 2 to 3 years, I don't think would exist at all if Pulsar hadn't done this, or somebody. Again, it was going to happen. I mean, you can't say, if Henry Ford hadn't have done what he did, somebody was going to do it. But Pulsar just needs to get the credit for bringing the specs and the features and all this stuff to the forefront. Again, 17 micron thermal optics for, all the way down to $1,900 with 50 hertz refresh rates. I mean, we don't even talk about refresh rates anymore because every scope out there is at least 50 or 60. Doesn't matter which it is. They're basically the same. So I just want to make the point. We've come a long, long ways. I'm gonna say one more thing here, Hans. So in let's see, let me do some math here. 2016, 2017, the only thermal companies on the market You had ATN. They'd been around a long time. I mean, in their defense, ATN had been doing this, making thermal optics as long as anybody, if maybe not longer. FLIR, they were still around in their own capacity, making thermal scopes. Armasight was around. They were buying thermal sensors from FLIR. We had IR Defense, and IR Defense is basically, not basically, they are the scopes that Trijicon sells now. Trijicon bought out IR Defense in 2016. Okay. And so those were the top of the line units back then. And if you can believe it, those units have remained basically unchanged besides the housings since 2016 when they bought them. Before that, 2014, 2015, those units are still basically the same. But our defense took over Trijicon, and we had Pulsar. That was basically it. I mean, that was what you were dealing with here in the U.S. for mainstream thermal companies in, again, 2016, 17, 18. That's where it was at. And man, how the times have changed. Now it's like, everybody's got a thermal optic.
Yeah, I think the big question, and maybe we'll get into that, is will the market, will the development, research and development, go as far as it will in the next 6 years, 5 or 6 years, as it did in the past 5 or 6 years? Is there going to be that much movement? Is there going to be that much technology difference and change? I mean, that's the big question. That's what everybody wants to know. And the second segment to this show, the first one was where have we come, in the past 5 or 6 years, is where are we going in the next 5 or 6 years? And I think that's really exciting to take a look at, because as more and more scopes are on the streets, people have the popularity of this sport is growing. As the market and sales continue to explode, more companies are getting more and more competitive with each other. And you see that now. I mean, think about how many scopes just in the last year have been released in companies that have got into the market in the last 2 to 3 years. I mean, it's gotten very competitive. Whereas 3 and 4 years ago, we were saying there needs to be more competition. And now we're like, oh my gosh, we don't need any more companies to get in, because we've got so many options out there that is confusing, and hopefully why a lot of you watch this show. But where are we going to be in the next 5 or 6 years? And so let's take a look at some of the features that people like and I think want to expand on. I would say, and I think a great example of that is evidenced this year, where you are seeing more optics now this year coming out with laser rangefinders. In the last year or two, there were very few amount of optics that actually came with the laser range of integrated built-in laser rangefinder. This year, there are significantly more scopes with laser rangefinders on the market. And for the first time last year, we've had our first thermal optics where you had the option to add the laser rangefinder as a plug-and-play accessory, which is a great direction for the industry, where people may buy a scope but realize a year down the road, like, man, I wish I had a laser rangefinder. Well, let me just pick up this accessory that plugs into the side of the scope, and I can turn it into exactly what I want it to be. But, laser rangefinder, I think that's an option that might be in the next 5 or 6 years. That, who knows, Jason, might be in every scope that comes on the market. That would be pretty cool. All right.
Yeah, I think we're looking at things like that. I mean, making some of these things modular, meaning you can take it off, you can, put it on, you can buy it later, you can accessorize with it. Speaking of that, I think something that we're seeing from a lot of the manufacturers right now is a move for battery life. I think this is something that is going to get it's going to get interesting to see what happens, because you've got some companies like Pulsar that have given us really good battery life, but they've done it with proprietary battery packs. Infrared's done it with their cabin units, and trying to think of anything else. I know some of the AGM have internal batteries and that sort of thing. So I think my prediction is going to be that the battery life situation is going to continue to get better and better. But what I don't know if I'm willing to predict or not is if it's going to be through, something like 18650 batteries that we all love because they're cheap, they're good, they're removable, they're rechargeable. I do think there'll be a push in that direction, but I don't know if I can see Pulsar and some of these other companies giving up their proprietary batteries, not because they make money. I really don't think they do. I think they just want to, be in control of that whole unit. They know if they give you this battery, what you're going to get out of it versus you buying some, El Cheapo battery on Amazon or eBay and sticking it in your scope. And so I don't know. I do think battery life, though, we're seeing even like these new Pulsars that are announced at the SHOT Show and then, at EWA over in Europe now. It's better battery life.
Yeah.
The Envisions, they're using the rechargeable 18650s, the AGM varmints and fusions 18650. So I think there's a little bit of a push towards 18650s, but I think there's just really a push for better battery life. Period.
Better battery life, absolutely, and that's a big important feature for a lot of customers. I would also say, obviously video recording, it's hard to find a scope now that doesn't have video recording, but there's still a lot of scopes on the market that don't have audio recording. And I know that is a growing feature that a lot of people like. It is causing some people to hesitate on buying an optic because it doesn't have audio. Although audio for a video recording is not essential, it is nice to have. It's, being able to have that full experience when they share the video of having the sound of it. And I do think that that's something as well, that as they start to continue to do the manufacturing on these scopes, that putting a microphone in there and having audio with the video recording, it's just like this. So we've got what we talked about at the beginning of the show, the Hogster 35 and 25 vibes. For however long, a year or two, we had just the Hogster 35s, basic scope, no video recording, no Wi-Fi, great scope, but didn't have all the extras, the video recording. Well, they come out with the Hogster 25 and 35 vibe. Basically, what they added was video recording and Wi-Fi capabilities. And they did that for a very, very small upgrade in price. Just stupid small.
$25 on the 35. It went from $25.75 to $25.95. Yeah.
But they did that, Jason, and you know this better than anybody. They did that, and the reason they changed it is because they realized that they were losing sales to other scopes in the same price range that had video recording. So what happens in the next year or two? And they say, well, what can we do to make this scope a little bit better, keep costs down, but also give it a competitive edge? Well, let's throw a microphone in it. Let's give it audio recording. And I think it's little steps like that, and that they can do without a very big upgrade in price. Almost essentially the same price.
So I want to bring that up. This is something I say it's common. It's maybe, one person every week or every other week. I got an email this weekend. A guy said, I want to buy a scope, but I do not want it to have video recording. I'm like, well,
hey, good luck.
You can buy a $7,000-$8,000 Trigicon.
Yeah.
That's about the last thing on the market. It's like, I don't know what to tell you. That just doesn't exist anymore. And I know that there are some guys that I think it's a confusion. I think, number one, they don't need it. They don't want it, which is perfectly fine. But I think that they believe, number one, it's going to cost more,
right,
and it's going to be harder to use the unit. Well, I'll always tell them, listen, if you don't want to record, don't record.
Right.
If you don't want to use cruise control on your truck, don't use it. It's not going to hurt you that it's there, but it doesn't cost more anymore to add those things. Now, in 2017, that was a big deal. But like you just brought up, Behring added video Wi-Fi with the smartphone app, and that scope, that particular scope went up $25. Okay, they'd be a fool not to have it in there for that little bit of money. Right. So yeah, you're right. Everything is going to have that. I think audio is the next step. I tell you, and the laser rangefinder, that's a big one. You brought that up. I think we're going to see the displays just continue to get a little better and a little better. I know in the new Super Hogster A3, it got an upgraded display screen. I think we will see that as that evolution of display screens just gets better, period. I mean, these screens are used in a lot of things besides thermal scopes, okay? They're not made for thermal scopes. They're made for all kinds of things. And so I think as those get better, they'll continue to put those in scopes. But I'm going to tell you a big one that is changed really in just the last few years is the warranty. So until Envision really bounced onto the scene into the thermal hunting market, they came in with a 5-year warranty. There was not a thermal optic on the U.S. market that had longer than a 3-year warranty. That was it.
Right.
3 years. I mean, the whole industry was 3 years. I don't think anybody was less, but nobody was more. And Envision came in. It very expensive, top of the line optics, 5-year warranty. And people were like, whoa, that's amazing. But nobody was expecting anybody else to do it. It's like, hey, you're buying a Cadillac. That's understandable. We get it. But now we're seeing more of these companies come in and add 4-year warranties like Bearing or 5-year warranties like, IRA USA. And man, that's a big deal. And there's a lot of guys that they get down to the decision on these scopes and they go 3-year, 4-year, or 3-year, 5-year, or 4-year, 5. And it's like, if I got to flip a coin, I'd like to have 1 more year of warranty on this very expensive scope. And you cannot blame them.
I think all the companies that are sitting around now that are still at 3-year warranty, I think they're having some hard discussions internally, being like, okay, well, what are we going to do? We don't want to be the last company still just only offering a 3-year warranty. So that's a big deal. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And I'd say this too. I also understand from those companies' point of view is, listen, these warranties are expensive to offer. And when you start getting into 4 and 5 years, it's likely that this optic that this guy has a problem with is not even going to exist anymore. I mean, 5 years, it's probably not going to be here. So we're not going to have the parts to fix it. So we're going to have to give him a whole new optic. That is an expensive line item for a company to look at 5 years down the road on something. And again, folks, I know these thermal optics are expensive. I mean, relatively speaking, but you could buy a lot more expensive things that don't have, 4 or 5-year warranties. A lot of stuff doesn't have a 3-year warranty. And so it's an expensive cost to these companies, but I think you're right. I think they're going to have to start looking at this.
So let's recap a little bit. We talked about the laser rangefinder, battery life.
Yeah, go ahead. I got 2 more things on my list.
Yeah, I got 2 more too. We got talking about expanding audio, displays improving, warranty improving. So I want to bring up one. I know it's one of your 2, and I'll let you bring up the last one. Okay. Something that we saw for the first time now. I think it is going to be something we see a lot more of than that's optical zoom. I think we with the zoom monocular, the infrared outdoor zoom monoculars that have the optical zoom where you're basically changing the focal length of the optic. So you're keeping your full resolution whenever you go from, 1.6 up to 3.2 power. You're still keeping the same 640 resolution. I do see that as something that a lot of companies pick up on. It'll probably start with the higher end optics, I would assume, from the expense factor. But I mean, what if Envision, what if Pulsar, IRA continues? What if they, are building these high-end units like a Halo XRF, and with the Halo XRF, the base magnification is 3.5 power. But what if they made it, 2 power and 4 power with an optical zoom in between? I mean, that would be a scope that could be used for anybody. I'm not going to use the term that I don't like, the game changer, but because I refuse to use that in reference to optics, but it would be revolutionary. And I don't know, maybe they don't want to do it because maybe it would cost them sales from other scopes that they have, that they're like, well, why would you need, this Halo X35 if you can have the Halo XRF that does both,
sell the same amount of scopes, but less models. I mean, I'd love that. I'd love less models and Hey,
Optical
speaking of
zoom,
that,
I think optical zoom is going to be a part of what we see.
I do too. And speaking of that, thermal manufacturers, if you're listening, the magic number is 2 power and 4 power. That's the perfect number. I mean, 2 and 4. Oh my goodness. I mean, you just got a hog hunter and a coyote hunter. You got the hog hunter who wants to shoot 4 power when he's, got something out there at 150 yards. That is just 2 and 4 is it. It's not 1 and 2. 1.5 and 3. Okay. The zoom for a monocular, I like. I want that to be lower for a handheld. I'm talking about for weapons mounted rifle scopes. Man alive, I'm with you. I think that's going to be something that we're going to see. Right. Last one I'm going to touch on here. I know we're going long. We've hinted around, talked about this a little bit on the show before, but that is the super high resolution. When are we going to get out of 640 and move into the modern world of high resolution stuff? And I would say that's coming. Infrared has a 1080 thermal sensor. It is currently not in a scope. It's not in anything right now. I think I think they will put that sensor into a scope. What's it going to cost? I don't know. Maybe $15,000-$20,000. Who knows? But that's what's got to happen. And I already know this. I can hear it. The minute that someone does it, whether it's infrared or somebody else, they have this scope that say it's $15,000-$20,000. Okay. There's going to be all this booing and hissing from guys going, well, that's just for the rich boys. Listen, give it 5 years, then you'll get one for $3,000. Right. You've got to start at the top and let it trickle down. If it doesn't, it will never happen. So when the first time you see that, just know one day, it may be 5 years. It may be 10 years. One day, you'll be able to have that too in a very affordable optic, because those prices will come down. But I think in less than 5 years, we will see a 1080 high resolution optic. I'm not going to predict how soon. I think it'll be 5 years or less. I also think it will be sooner than later, but I think it's going to be expensive. But I am excited about that. And the last thing I want to touch on real quick is price. Everybody always wants to know, when are they going to get cheaper? When are they going to get cheaper? They're getting cheap. They just really, really are. I mean, you can get entry-level thermal optics for $2,000. There's sub-entry level stuff now that is below that price. The 640 prices are inching down a little bit. I mean, we've got, 640s now for $4,000, $4,500, $4,600. The prices are inching that way. I think that the top end is going to stay high. I think there's going to be some fluctuation as some of these 640s come down a little bit. I think we're still going to be looking in that, I'm going to make a prediction here and say maybe some of the mid-grade stuff drops below $3 and gets into that $2,700, $2,800 range over the next few years. Maybe. But I still think you're going to be looking in that $3,000 to $3,500 for your mid-range. Right. I do think it's possible that some of the optics that are this $2,000 to $2,500 range now, they might move into the $1,500, $1,800s, over the next couple of years. I think that's a possibility. But these are expensive optics. Again, long warranties, a lot of features, a lot of things going on. I don't see, again, I'm making this terrible prediction, but I don't see in the next 5 years the price on everything just dropping by 50%. I just don't see that happening.
I don't think so, but I think what you're seeing is a substitution of value and features.
Yes.
And that's where everything's going. And I think people in most part are okay with that. I think that shows by the industry and the growth. You and I get amazed sometimes, but the amount of people that just call up and are ordering $6,000, $7,000, $9,000 scopes.
Or $3,000 or $2,000. Yeah.
And it's all day, every day. And it's, there's a lot of things that can affect that. But, with this list, and I'll go over it one more time, and your and our prediction, we're going to see more optics with laser rangefinders. Increased battery life, I think, is a must. I mean, that's such a huge focus for a lot of people. expanded amount of audio and optics, improved displays, optical zoom, warranty, price, and resolution. I mean, those are, I think, obviously that the most important of those are picture quality, and the price, I think, is what weighs most on people's mind. But there's a lot of good features in there that we'd love to see expanded. And I do think, we can basically say that thermal optics as we know it began 6 years ago, as far as in the popular form. Think about in the next 6 years. I mean, and that's what's fun to think about, is where is this going to go? I think I said it a couple of years ago on these scopes. Maybe one day you'll push a button and the scope will float off your rifle, and then like a missile go to the hog, but drop something on
there you go.
But it's definitely fun to think about.
I'm gonna make a final prediction, and my final prediction is the day is coming, and I think it's coming sooner than it is later. I think this could be within 5 years or less, where there comes a point that it stagnates. And just like now, smartphones is an example. Okay. Apple comes out with a new iPhone every 6 months, 12 months. I don't know what it is. The reason I don't know is because it's not that exciting.
Well,
right?
I'm glad you brought that, but think about this. And you kind of see some correlation between this and, Pulsar, or not Pulsar, Apple, let's just say every year, their big thing is, I don't know, it's got a faster processor, it's faster processor. Well, think about Pulsars, they got the Thermion 2, the Thermion 2 Pro. Well, basically it's an upgrade in thermal sensors, so
it is.
The changes are getting a little bit smaller. There's not as big a step up as you can take, for sure.
No, that's exactly the point. So it's not that you can make the point, well, I'll never buy another phone. That's bull. You're going to use it and you're going to wear it out and you're going to drop it and it's going to start getting slower and you're going to want a new one. I'm not a guy who buys a new phone every time one comes out, but I'm still got to get one every 2, 3, 4 years. I'm going to go as long as I can, but I'm going to have to get a new one. Right. And so I think we're going to come to that point with thermals where it's, oh my gosh, there's a new whiz bang. And you're like, well, what's it really do different than mine? I don't care, but you know what? Mine's getting older and I'll probably get another one next year. And where I think is just like these phones, I don't think that you'll always see that improvement from last year and this year. It's like, oh, it's a little better, I think. But when you miss a couple of generations, then you see it. If you've got a phone that's 2 years old or 3 years old, same thing with your scope. You keep that thing 2-3 years, then it's like, oh man, okay, I see the big upgrade. So anyway, that's my prediction. Hans, I think making these predictions like this is fun, and it's stupid because it's going to make us look really, really dumb in 5 years when there's laser beam shooting thermal scopes, and it's,
and you can get it for $99. Yeah,
$99.
We will delete this podcast from existence, but well before that time. But don't worry about it.
That's right.
They're hopefully again. The reason why you're watching the show is because we're talking about this kind of stuff. We are here to be a source of information, but at the same time, we kind of put a lot of this information out because we know the manufacturers are watching, and that is a fact, y'all. The manufacturers do watch this show, and hopefully they'll catch up on these little hints that we're dropping as far as what the customers want. I don't know if they listen to us. They do watch, but I don't know if they listen to us. But anyway,
that's right.
If you want to find any of these thermal optics, you can do so on OutdoorLegacyGear.com. You can call me or Jason if you're interested in buying an optic and you are confused on which one to get. Give us a call, 877-350-1818. We literally do use and hunt with every optic that comes out on the market that we sell. So give us a call, 877-350-1818. You can find Jason and Outdoor Legacy on the socials, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, Outdoor Legacy. You can find me over on YouTube at Hans ETX. That's Hans East Texas on YouTube, and you can find me on Instagram at Hans ETX. But go check out all of the past episodes of the Late Night Vision Show, all 202 previous episodes and more, because there's some bonus shows in there as well. But go check it out on the latenightVisionShow.com.
All right, folks, we hope to see y'all again next week for episode 204 between now and then. Y'all stay safe in the fields and keep making those bacon pancakes.